Welcome to the Northern Ontario Mining Showcase podcast. It's a limited series for the Echo Community Podcast Network by Story Studio Network and Clark Communications. We highlight the influential voices, partners, and leaders who are driving innovation, research, and development, creating new market opportunities and new ways of doing business in the mining industry.
The Echo Community Network is on location at the Northern Ontario Mining Showcase, better known as NOMS. And joining us is Maria Story, the president of Story Environmental. Maria, welcome, first of all, to the 2024 show.
Thank you, Scott. I'm happy to be here.
Great to have you here. And tell us a little bit about what brought Story Environmental and why it's important for them to be here at PDAC.
So Story Environmental is a boutique environmental and engineering firm. We're located in Haileybury, Ontario, which is 5 hours north of Toronto. And we're really located in the heart of mining of Northern Ontario. And we're really strategically positioned to service the mining industry. We come to NOMS to promote, obviously, our service, our employees, and meet with clients, meet with Indigenous communities, build relationships. Part of consulting really is built on trust. And the more you can see people face to face, the better the relationships become. Coming to PDAC is a big part of that.
How has your journey been? Tell us a little bit. You're a chemical engineer. You're the president of this environmental firm. Just before we turned everything on here, you were telling me that your dad is a mechanical engineer, and how you got here. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
So I grew up in Northern Ontario, close to Haileybury, went to high school, and have an aptitude for math and sciences. And so in grade 12 and 13, my chemistry teacher said to me, "Maria, have you ever thought of chemical engineering?" Well, to be honest with you, didn't really even know what it was. But he told me he actually had been a chemical engineer and then became a teacher. And he really was instrumental in my decision to apply for chemical engineering. I went to chemical engineering at University of Toronto, loved it. It was a fabulous 4 years. After that, I worked in a big chemical manufacturing company in their environmental engineering group for about 6 years. And met who I'm now married to and had to move. I moved to Winnipeg and I worked for a small environmental consulting business there. And my former employer, which was ICI, Canada Imperial Chemical Industries, formerly CIL, reached out to me and said, "Maria, we can't do this without you." So I ended up working for them through this other consulting company. Ultimately, it didn't work out and I formed my own business and they were my first client. And that was in 1996.
I find it fascinating that, I'm from Northern Ontario, and I know Haileybury is not this giant metropolis. You have this incredible educational background and vocation. You could probably travel anywhere in the world with what you have. And you're in Haileybury.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a story behind that. I was in Winnipeg when I first formed the business. And then we moved to Edmonton for a bit. And my mom passed away and I wanted to be closer to my dad. So we moved back to Haileybury to be closer to my dad for a few years. And the business just grew and we never left. So it's a beautiful place to live. I live and work. I live on a lake. I can go kayaking on Saturday after dinner. I can go paddleboarding. Any day I want in the summertime. We spend a lot of time outdoors, cross-country skiing and snowshoeing and hiking and mountain biking. And
there's something beautiful about that, right? You work all day and then
it's a beautiful balance.
It really is.
It's a really beautiful work-life balance. And it was a great area, a great place to raise children as well. So
I agree. Tell us a little bit about what's exciting you right now about, it's interesting when I say that to someone who's tied to environmental. What's exciting you about the environment?
That's we could talk about a lot of things, but what really excites me now is the critical mineral industry. We're working for quite a few junior mining companies that are working tirelessly to develop these projects and extract these minerals from the subsurface. And we work with them to permit those projects. So Yeah, it's really exciting. It's an exciting time for mining.
And you're probably on the front line of this, and often in the general public, sometimes mining gets this bad rap for its environmental record, and I think some of it's deserved. But the work that you do today within the mining industry, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that bad rap first.
Yeah, please.
So I would say yes, historically, yeah, there was some truth to that. But now mining companies are being so duly diligent to protect the environment. And in fact, I really believe that in some cases, going above and beyond. In many cases, I mean, it's a balance, right? We all are impacting the environment every day. And mining really has been had a negative rap when it shouldn't have, right? Every time we walk out the door, get in our car and drive down the street, we're negatively impacting the environment.
Right.
But mining companies, that impact tends to be more focused, right? It's on, and it's more in the media. It's more, we think about it more. And anyway, I really do think mining companies, I mean, the work we do is helping mining companies to work towards those goals, but they are truly wanting to be there already. We just help them achieve those goals.
You're not a check. So what you're saying, you're not a check box. It's like, okay, let's get the environmental team and we move on. It's
no, it's way beyond. It's a vision. Almost all mining companies now have a vision for the environment, protecting the environment, working with the Indigenous communities. And how do we balance all of this, right? Because there's still the bottom line. And we need these critical minerals. And I mean, there's the laws of science that you can't defy, right? You can't do anything without an impact.
right.
So my job, and one of the most exciting things for me, is balancing all of that. So I'm balancing the needs of our clients with the regulations, with the needs of the environment. And one of the things I really pride myself in is looking at everything holistically. So you have to look at the whole picture, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned it quickly there. We work with First Nation communities across the region. And your work with the Indigenous communities in this process is critical.
Definitely. I mean, they are really the keepers of the land, right? And the waters. And in the end, we're on their territories. And it's really important to ensure that the work we do is respectful to their rights and their interests, their traditional knowledge. And again, it's all about balancing. It's about creating relationships. It's about ensuring that they trust you. They don't ever doubt what you're saying to them. And I often say to my clients, you know, it has to start at the beginning. And you have to bring those communities along with you and educate them as you go so they understand the implications, the complications. You know, it's not, sometimes they have to make difficult decisions. You can't develop a mine without some impact.
Right. And we should mention too, right, that many of these First Nation communities have highly skilled technicians that are on site that you work in partnership with.
That's
so
right.
They understand the geography and the biology and everything that's going on.
Exactly.
But they also bring to the table about, I want to say medicines that they teach us.
Their traditional knowledge.
Their traditional knowledge, and there's medicines in this area, and this is the medicines we use, and this is the,
That's right.
the different things that we grow here. So learning all that and the impact of that, right?
It's really interesting. And in fact, we have memorandums, agreements with Indigenous communities whereby we work with them. So with some of our clients, we have an agreement with the Indigenous community whereby they come out and support us in the work we do. And we also get involved with clients when they are working with the Indigenous communities to understand exactly what you're talking about. The medicinal plants that are growing in and around the property. What are they gathering? What are they hunting in the area? What is really important to them? And what can the mining companies do to help protect those that important knowledge. And
we were on location at the Northern Ontario Mining Showcase. I'm Scott Clark with Maria Story from Story Environmental. And this is all part of the PDAC 2024 conference. So Maria, tell us from an environmental standpoint, what's exciting you? What's cool? What's happening? Because there's always innovation in science. And
yeah, so I guess one of the things that is really cool right now is just this week, I've been asked by one of our clients to get involved in a carbon capture project. So as you know, we're all trying to reduce the carbon dioxide that is emitted to our atmosphere to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And this particular client is being super innovative. And what they're trying to do is develop technology. I mean, it's already developed, but they need to test it and determine whether it will be feasible in Northern Ontario, whereby they would inject the carbon dioxide deep into the subsurface, where it would react with the mineralization in the rocks, and it would actually stabilize the CO2 forever.
forever.
So it will enable this mining company to become a net zero carbon mining facility. It's really exciting.
Like that it could potentially be the near future.
Definitely. Wow. And it's actually the same technology is being worked on in Saskatchewan, in the oil fields. They're working, there are some there's a lot of research going on right now. So.
And in basic terms, because you're way smarter than me, when you're capturing, when you do a project like this, it's not captured and then it's in a solid and then you inject that solid into the ground. Is that what?
Well, it's actually, it's a liquid.
Oh, it's a liquid.
It will be a liquid in both cases. So in Western Canada, they're looking at basically taking the CO2 and compressing it into a liquid. So they're taking the gas, making it into a liquid, and then injecting it into the subsurface. And for Northern Ontario, they're actually looking at taking the carbon dioxide. When you mix carbon dioxide with water, it becomes an acid, a dilute acid. And they're going to inject that dilute acid in the subsurface, where it will react with the minerals in the rock and create minerals that are insoluble.
That's incredible.
Isn't that fascinating? Yeah, that's really cool. It's really, so it's these types of things that, I mean, I've been doing this for 34 years and I still love what I do.
Could you imagine if we go back to the younger Maria at U of T, first year, second year U of T, and that's what you're working on now? Would that even have been in your lexicon?
You know, at the time, no, I wouldn't have even, no.
It's like, that's impossible.
No, that's right. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I always knew I wanted to try to make a difference. And it's not, this is a really exciting project and I believe it will make a difference. But, every day we pride ourselves at Story we think out of the box. Yeah. It's one of the things we really do. And every project has challenges. And one of the things that I really am proud of is our ability to look at those challenges, evaluate them, come up with environmentally responsible and innovative solutions, which can and meet the needs of, like I've said before, our clients, the Ministry of the Environment, the Ministry of Mines, and are financially feasible, right? So as engineers, we can solve any problem we can solve, but it's all with a cost.
Yeah.
And so as engineers, we're always trying to balance that, right? It's always about a balance. You're always trying to balance what's right for the environment, what's right for the bottom line, what's right for the regulators.
I remember Roy Slack from Cementation said to me years ago, he said, Scott, if like when we look around us at this table, he said, if it's not grown, it's mined. Right? It's like, so everything around us, we can't take mining out of the equation of society.
That's right.
We can't take farming out of the equation of,
It's true.
It's all, so your job, and it's a job is making sure that balance and you're doing the right thing for society.
Right. I say the same thing about engineering. I sometimes go into public schools, and I know this isn't directly related to mining, but I sometimes go into public schools and high schools and talk about engineering. And they say, well, what is engineering? I say, well, point to something in this room. And they'll point to it. And I say, do you think an engineer was involved in that? And an engineer...
Involved in everything.
They're involved in everything. There isn't anything that an engineer isn't involved with at some point along the way. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about Story Environmental. What other things are happening and that we need to know for 2024 and here? What are you coming out with?
So Story Environmental right now, we're really busy working with the critical mineral industry. We're working to permit several refineries, mining projects. There's a lot happening, and it's really exciting to be part of this movement right now. I mean, Ontario is really well positioned to become a significant player in the EV market, right? We have a wealth of critical minerals. We have over a century of automotive manufacturing experience. We have access to the skilled labor force, and we have a government that's backing this financially. What I'm trying to do in all of that is I'm really trying to help the regulators. So every one of these projects have to be permitted from an environmental perspective. They have to be, in Ontario, a mining project is approved through the filing of a closure plan. So you have to submit to the Ministry of Mines.
What's going to happen 30 years from now?
How you're going to close it.
Right.
So the client has to prepare a closure plan, and they have to provide with that the funds necessary to do that. So the Ministry of Mines has been really working hard over the last 18 months to make this whole process more efficient. Just the week before PDAC, there's a new regulation called Rehabilitation of Lands that is going to come into force on April 1st. But the Ministry of the Environment is lagging, and I really, truly believe they're hindering the process. There are critical permits that you need from the Ministry of the Environment, and it takes about 2 years. So by the time we have to characterize the environment as environmental engineers, and we're characterizing the surface water, the groundwater, the benthic invertebrates, the sediment. We have to do surveys for species at risk and birds and vegetation and mammals. It's a lot of data. We have to gather all that data. We have to interpret that data. We have to prepare the supporting documents for the permits. And all of the engineering for the project is done in parallel with this, and it feeds into those supporting documents for the permits. At the we can work hours and hours, like overtime to try to get this. And it's about 2 years. The very quickest we can do that is about 2 years. But then the Ministry of the Environment requires their service standard is 12 months to review an application.
It takes you 2 years and
to do all of the work, gather all the data, interpret the data, create the supporting documents for all of the engineering to be done. But then the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, their service standard is a year to approve them. So it's hindering this, and I'm really trying to find ways to make this more, just less timely, like more timely.
Because what you're saying is basically after 3 years, that maybe you'll be approved.
And that's only if it doesn't have to go through a federal impact assessment.
Could you
so if you have to go through a federal impact assessment, which is the next level of regulations, right? So we have the federal regulations, we have the provincial regulations, you have the municipal regulations, there's all these levels of regulations. So you can imagine if a mining company wants to develop a project, it can take 10 years.
Wow.
It can take 15 years from the time they start drilling. 20 years exploration. That's right. It's a huge. It's hard to conceive, really, unless you're right in it.
I had an opportunity to sit with the Minister Honorable Vic Fedeli, and he was explaining the size of this EV plant that they're opening up in, I think, the Stratford area. It's like the building itself is 1.5 kilometers long.
That's right.
With Volkswagen. Man, it's $7 billion deal. But then the fascinating part was we that gets all the headlines. But how, and I'll say this is where Story Environmental comes in, how they get all the resources to build those cars are all going to come from Ontario, from all different places, and at the core of it is what you're saying is those precious minerals that are coming from Northern Ontario.
The critical minerals.
The critical minerals.
That's right. So, and there are so many projects that are currently under development at various stages of permitting, and they can't start mining until it's fully permitted. And oftentimes those permitting, it's a long process.
So your hope is that with the Story Environmental, and the creative thinking and how we can move things forward, and all the data research and working collectively with the government, we can start really, energizing the economic engine of Ontario through all of this.
We really can.
And it all starts with those people on the ground.
It truly does. It truly does.
You're the ones that do it. So,
well, it's the people even before us.
Who comes
even
before
we get involved, these companies are doing exploration. It's called early exploration, drilling kilometers and kilometers and kilometers in the ground and extracting core that they then analyze to determine whether there's enough resource to develop a mine. That's right. So there are all of these levels of assessment from an economic perspective, a feasibility perspective, even before we get involved. We get involved sort of at the latter stages of that, because you need to start to develop your baseline environmental data. You have to start to collect that surface water data and the groundwater data, do your surveys for species at risk. And you have to start putting the pieces of the puzzle together early on, because you don't want to miss something.
Right. So
because you have to have all those pieces in place so that once you get to the point where you need to create these supporting documents for the permits, you can't have missed something that you should have been collecting 12 months ago or 16 months ago. Or
out of curiosity, because of your involvement in the mining sector and seeing how these projects potentially will grow in the future, for those who haven't seen PDAC, and especially when you're on the investor side, that's where those junior miners are like, hey, there might be. What is that? Does it make you feel hopeful? You see everybody's working at all these different areas to make everything all come together in this magical moment. It's like, yes, you can dig here.
No, I think it's a real mix of emotion, to be honest with you. Sometimes you can work so hard and believe you've done such a great job, and then in the end, the price of the mineral drops, or they just can't get their funding and the project gets shelved for a long time. And then sometimes all the pieces fall into place. Recently, we fully permitted a cobalt sulfate manufacturing facility in Northern Ontario.
Yeah.
And that was really exciting.
Yeah,
so
that's big news in cobalt.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was really exciting. And we were responsible for all of that permitting for electrobattery through the whole process. That was an exciting process.
Yeah, that must have been like for us in Northern Ontario, cobalt was at one time silver, I believe, right? Is it silver?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
That cobalt built Bay Street.
Yeah.
So in the early 1900s, there were over 100 mines operating in a very small area. And
really,
it's the history there is really phenomenal.
So it must have really energized the community, though. At
that time, it was actually cobalt had an NHL hockey team.
Okay,
it's
I didn't know that.
It was a going concern. Yeah, for sure. It was probably bigger than the Klondike Gold Rush. It doesn't get the same publicity.
No.
But it was, it was quite the era of mining in Canada, for sure.
Well, you're at an exciting time. You're at the pointy part of the spear as we get rolling here. And Maria Story is the president of Story Environmental. It's been a pleasure talking with you here at the Northern Ontario Mining Showcase on the Echo Network. And any last things you want to say, Maria?
One thing one thing that I'd like to challenge all of the engineers that work in this field to do, this is more from an environmental perspective than a mining perspective, but I really want us all to start approaching technologies, new developments from a more environmentally holistic perspective. Oftentimes we're a water engineer or we're an air engineer, and we do our work in isolation of the other environmental medias. And for the environment's sake, we need to start thinking about the whole picture, and we need to do a better job of that. But I'm so excited to be part of this endeavor to make Ontario a leader in EV manufacturing. So.
Maria Story Environmental. I'm really much more confident knowing that you're at the front of this and you're leading the charge.
Thank you so much, Todd.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Northern Ontario Mining Showcase podcast. The series is produced for the Echo Community Podcast Network by Story Studio Network and Clark Communications. For more information, visit our website, northbayecho.ca.